Now looking at dimension styles. It's very easy to get dimensions down onto an AutoCAD drawing, but it's not so easy to get them to look exactly how you want them to look. So for example, the decimal places here, you notice there's a comma, which is not our Australian standard, as opposed to a decimal place. This baseline spacing that we mentioned in the last video, the angle of the writing, all those sorts of things that you might want to tailor in your drawings. So if we pull down the drop down here from the dimensions panel, and we'll stay with ISO 25 for now and go into modify, and let's look at the options here. So first of all, in the lines section, you've got complete control over all of your dimensions. You can turn on or off the dimension lines, and the dimension line is that one that the writing is under. The extension line is the one coming out from the job, and we can turn either of those on or off, which you may want to do if it's coming hard up close to the job and you may not need the extension line there. Now there's lots of other variables too. Different styles here of the arrowhead will determine what's exactly happening at the arrow here, but in this case we've got an extension beyond the dimension line, and there's the setting for that there. There's an offset from the job to the extension line. I usually like to bump that up a little bit there, make that a bit bigger gap off the job. And the baseline spacing, as I mentioned before, normally we would set that at about 10 if we're working at a scale factor of 1 to 1, so you get a nice offset of 10 millimeters on all of your dimension lines. So now if we move across to symbols and arrows, and this is where we select our arrowhead type. Engineering drawings is normally just a closed filled arrow, but as you can see there's lots of other options there. The architectural tick, if you are drawing plans, you might want to change it to that. Center marks, whether we have one or not, and the size of it. Now break size is important when we have the text set into the line, because there will be a break between the line and the start of the text. If we increase this break size here and the text is above the line, it generally will push the text higher than the line. Can't really see it in that instance. Let's just move across to text. This is the one here that I was looking for, offset from dimension line. So that's very close to the line. If we increase that, it will push it above the line, and that's more important if you've got the text placement, the vertical placement. If you've got it centered in the line, then this offset from the dimension line will increase the gap between the text and the start of the dimension line. Text height here, currently on 2.5. If we want to make that bigger, we can. Not going to look much good if we do that in this case. Now what we need to remember is that the text height is only effective here if the text style that we are using has a variable text size set. Now you might recall from when we were talking about text that we left the height as 0, and every time we did text it asked us what size it was. So if we can go and look at that style here by clicking on these ellipses here. So that's taken us to look at the standard style, and we can see that the height is set to 0. So that means it will take whatever size we tell it, and if it's being used by the dimension style, it will take that 2.5 and apply it to the standard. If we'd had that set to a specific size such as 10, 5 or 10, then that will take precedence, and whatever we do here will have no effect. So that's a bit of a trap to watch out for. So we've got our position of our text. We have the position left or right. Normally we just leave it centered. Text alignment, aligned with the dimension line or horizontal, so the text always sits horizontally. And this is sort of a cross between the two. ISO standard, where the text for radius and diameter is horizontal, but the text is aligned with an aligned dimension and horizontal, so it's sort of a mixture of the two. Now the next one gets a little bit tricky. Fit options. The text, if it's too big to fit within the arrow, it will be placed outside, and we have a number of combinations here to decide what goes outside, whether it be the arrows or just the text or whatever it reckons is best. Suppress the arrows if they don't fit. Always force the text between the lines, so there's quite a few options there, and it can be quite tricky to get exactly the match you're looking for. We can have a leader coming off the text, like so. Over dimension line without a leader, so another variation. Scale factor we mentioned before. Now annotative scaling relates to paper space, so we won't cover that at the moment, but basically it allows us to maintain our text size regardless of the scale of the drawing. So in paper space we might have one part of the drawing shown at 1:2 and another part of the drawing shown at 1:1, and if we're using an annotative text and dimension style, the size of the text will say the same size even though the scale of the drawing has varied. So it's quite a good feature. If we're using one of these other features, then we wouldn't use this overall scale factor that we've placed there. Draw dimension line between extension lines. This will force that line to be drawn between the extension lines, so it's a cosmetic thing how you want it to appear. Primary units. This is important to us. Probably the most important one is the decimal separator, because the international standard is a comma, but in Australia we use a period, a full stop, so that's something that you should always change. We have control over our precision here, so back in our other drawing it looks pretty untidy because we've got decimal places here and we don't really need it, so we can reduce the precision there, and that can hide a multitude of sins too. If you've got some slight errors and you can't find out where those decimals are coming from, that will tidy it up for you. Prefix, suffix, so if you wanted to put millimeters after it, for example, if you have a lot of zeros, you can suppress the leading zeros, trailing zeros. So on this side we've got relating to linear dimensions, and over here relating to angular dimensions, and that's set to decimal degrees, so you can have it in degrees, minutes and seconds, gradients or radians, so we'll just stay with decimal degrees. Now the other ones we don't need to know about at this stage. Alternative units, so you can show the units in imperial. You might have drawn it in metric and you want to show it imperial, so you can show both or either. And tolerances, we do have the option to show tolerances in all the standard formats, but as I said, we won't be worrying about that at this stage. So those settings are pretty much what we want. We set that as current and close it, and we should see some differences now to what we just made. The decimal places are gone, the text is now set into the line, so there's quite a few changes we've made.